Dr. Azar Jammine is the chief economist at Econometrix and joins us live for more on this. Dr. Jammine, thank you so much for your patience. Very dramatic scenes rolling out of the power utility at Eskom and the, of course, anticipated response from the ANC regarding that sudden departure of the CEO, now former CEO, Mr. Ruyter. This must be really bad in terms of the branding of the power utility. It has not been doing well so far. What are your thoughts?
Well, without a doubt, it not very well will not be received and is not being received very well in financial markets, who not only have they been terrified in the last few weeks about the increased incidence of load shedding and its implications for overall economic growth and tax revenue collections, but now further are just perceiving that the power utility, which is at the heart of the South African economy, is basically rudderless. And the questions that are being asked is, no matter whether you agree or disagree with the way in which Ruyter has acted, the fact is, given what he has suggested happened, who is likely to be wanting to take on this job? And under the circumstances, one is terrified that the most central operational organization in South Africa will not have a leader for the foreseeable future. One is furthermore terrified that some of his senior staff might also see it necessary to withdraw their services. So it's quite a challenge. Who will be willing to take on this position, given what Ruyter claims he has actually experienced?
Yeah, leader after leader at the power utility, Dr. Jammine, leaves with some drama attached to them at Eskom. More than 10 CEOs, we've seen them since the dawn of democracy. Is this something that agencies such as the rating agencies likely to flag, to talk about, the instability with regards to leadership positions at the power utility and how those will impact on their nodes and the forthcoming nodes?
Without a doubt, I think ratings agencies will flag this dilemma as a very important question mark over South Africa's fiscal and financial sustainability. We had the good news yesterday that the government was actually about to take action to try and rectify Eskom's financial sustainability by transferring 60% of its loan book onto the government's own book. And this came with a number of very important provisions. But what one sees now is that there is a definite pushback on the conditions that have been imposed upon which government has now taken on this debt. And what one sees, especially given the comments that Ruyter made and the counter comments by the ANC through Fikile Mbalula, that there is an ideological battle taking place in South Africa currently between those who favor market-oriented solutions to our economic problems and the problems of SOEs, in terms of the solution being to try and get the private sector increasingly involved in resolving these issues, and on the one hand, and those who feel hell-bent on government ruling the roost and dictating the conditions under which these organizations have to continue operating, but with the knowledge that the government has been singularly unsuccessful in managing these SOEs, and we see it in the form of the collapse one by one of these SOEs. It's not just Eskom. Yes. Eskom is by far the most important, but one sees it in terms of problems with the rail and port network. One sees it with the problems at airports. One sees it with problems in the post office, and many other SOEs as well. And so this is an ideological battle that is taking place for the heart for the soul of the South African economy. And those who favor private sector involvement keep claiming that the government has proved itself incapable of actually running these organizations, therefore rather let the private sector get involved in doing so. And that's the point that Ruyter was trying to make, but he is now being castigated for claiming that, for actually claiming that there is an ideological battle going on.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about yesterday's figures that came out at the budget with regards to that bailout of 257 billion rand that is going to Eskom. It does have conditions attached to it. Do you think that these are enough to essentially get things going? We are seeing how the economy is really taking strain, how small businesses are closing, and all people want is power. How far is this 257 billion going to take South Africans in terms of us not being in the dark? What are your thoughts?
Well, the actual transfer of the debt book to the government itself is to some extent a bookkeeping exercise. It basically transfers the burden of funding electricity away from electricity tariff hikes to some extent towards taxpayers paying for this. So in a way, it's a case of robbing Peter to pay Paul. I don't know from that pure accounting point of view whether it makes a huge amount of difference. Officially, what it means is that the public debt to GDP ratio rises and the interest bill that government has to face now increases because it's now going to have to pay Eskom's debt interest bill as well. But to some extent, ratings agencies have always taken that into consideration, given that the government itself has been guaranteeing the lion's share of Eskom's debt in the first instance. Where the real issue lies is whether or not those conditions that have been put in place for that debt to be transferred can actually be enforced without the political will and support of the ANC to do so. It's all very well for Treasury to put those conditions in place, but will the ANC actually support those conditions, which essentially transfer a lot of the transmission and distribution future of, the generation future of electricity in the hands of the private sector? I mean, Eskom has been told you are not to spend any more money on generation for the next 3 years. You're not to borrow money for that purpose for the next 3 years. But can that actually be enforced without the support of the politicians in charge? And that's the question that needs to be asked.
Yeah. Dr. Jammine, while I still have you here, my thoughts are on things like debt collection of mechanisms that Eskom should be employing now. They sit with a high debt of municipal debt, around 50 or 53 billion or thereabouts, and just debt that they need to collect from households themselves. Do you think that they have strong enough mechanisms to support what the government is already doing, and now to make sure that they get their money that is owed to them, particularly from municipalities, so that they can actually get things going? Because if this does not happen, I can assure you that next February, you and I will be sitting like this and we will be discussing the very same thing.
I couldn't agree more with you. And the challenge is now, we're told, to try and introduce prepaid meters in townships rather than actual debt collection. The real problem with the outstanding debt is the fact that municipal rates are not being paid by residents, and the municipalities themselves depend on electricity payments to fund a lot of their expenditure in the absence of rates being paid. So it's actually quite a complex issue, and one doesn't know how well the government will be able to actually get on top of this dilemma. And again, you're quite right to say, are any of these solutions that have been brought, including the transfer of the debt, going to work if we can't actually implement law and order to ensure that people pay their debts?
Dr. Azar Jammine, always a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you very much for your time. That was Dr. Azar Jammine giving his thoughts on the latest with regards to Eskom.